had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.
So I'm trying to find the line between what we've already kind of talked about. I feel like we've dissected the studio space quite a bit.
We don't need to get into that too much.
But I think there's something interesting about you. We almost touched on it a little bit in the truck on the way over here.
A little pre-show.
About how like you've kind of aligned with something that has almost an unlimited longevity to it.
Yeah.
Whereas before you were kind of playing into a more of a trend or a cultural, I guess, cultural trend.
What was expected of me versus what I wanted.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to get into that a little, but also we kind of came to the realization when we were touring here, like the way Matt, his space is like very just, I mean, yeah, it's
full.
Like maximalist.
Yes.
And like chaotic, not chaotic, but like
it's just full and rich, busy to an objective observer, like someone who just walks in the room like, holy shit, this is a lot of stuff. Yeah. And, I'll admit sometimes there's going to be an editing process that might be like, you know what, maybe we don't need quite this down to, it's like the Russian dolls. It's like big and like all the way down to like tiny little things that are on the shelf and all that. So I think there will be some editing and obviously some stuff just with like the mechanics. Well, this doesn't feel right to go from here to here, or this needs to move, stuff like that. But yeah, and there's actually a few more things that I need to put up, something on the wall over here. There's a poster that's coming in the mail for this. I'll probably put another poster behind the door, so there's still some room for like wall decor and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, this is what's inside my head turned inside out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We thought it was funny though, because Matt, if you've ever worked with Matt, he's super, just type A brain.
Kind of regimented.
Just
and
boom, boom, boom. Like he's an AD. He's, he's been an editor.
Project manager, post
supervisor, like very, structured, organized roles. And then this is his studio. And then if you've ever worked with me, I don't know, maybe I don't want to self-diagnose, but I'm pretty opposite of that a little bit, just chaos and
yeah, it's hard because so much of what we've done together, not a lot on set. I mean, we made that, that spec commercial and all that. And, you were certainly focused, but you were also, not spinning as many plates as like a project manager would.
Yeah.
And we've done photography and stuff together, which is fairly straightforward.
This would probably be a better question to ask people who work with me.
Well,
but yeah,
here's where I think it comes up. I think sometimes it comes up in conversation a little bit, where you'll have maybe a couple things going on and, you'll just sometimes make things move in an interesting direction, not like abrupt or out of nowhere, like your complete subject change. So it comes up there. I think too, whenever we talk about something, especially project-based, that gets you fired up, it is like this room like in your brain. It's like everything is coming all at once. Like, oh, we could do this, then we do this. And I have a hard time keeping up with you sometimes just in like, having that conversation. So yeah, then your external, your external world is, and I have to be careful because sometimes I don't want to bring over too many treasures to you. Like, oh, I saw this and it reminded me of Alex. Like I got to be careful that I'm not treasure hunting for you. And like, this is all cool, Matt, but like, I don't want 800 things on a shelf. I want 8.
I will I'm not afraid to toss something, but so far we haven't crossed that threshold yet.
If you were maximalist in one area in your space, the only thing I could think of is your books.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, the books, well, and because especially recently, moving to more of like a analog note system.
Yeah.
the books are part of the process, like reading the books,
absolutely.
and then being able to go back and reference them, and have that as a physical object. It's just part of this reference system. So yeah, the books are going to continue to probably get out of control. I mean, Audrey and I, like, even when we're looking for houses now, it's like need something that could kind of become a library, or are going to have to like add that on.
Agreed.
Because it's just, I mean, I'm not like necessarily like, I don't love the idea of, we got rid of a bunch of books a couple weeks ago, and it felt good. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff. If I read something and it really has at least, you know, a few really interesting ideas, I'll keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little out of control, but
well,
we had to make a rule actually where we can't buy anything until we've read like 15 of what we have.
It's good. Yeah.
Because we were just.
And I've done that a little bit with the records where I'm like, if you're going to, even if it's $1, you've got to listen to it and see if you like it or not.
Yeah.
And if you like, it's just not quite the right thing, then, you know, trade it in or sell it or whatever to get
and
something
it can be tough
else.
with records because it's like, well, it's $1 and like, I'll get to it, but.
Or, you know, maybe I'll grow to like this later. Or what if in 5 years I become into this? Well, you can just get it back. Like,
well, and that's kind of how we have several books that, you know, some Audrey's read and I haven't read, or some I've read and she hasn't read, and then some that neither of us have read. And sometimes you get caught up in like, oh, I got to buy this now, and then you'll start it, and then it'll get put aside or something. But yeah, I really want to make a point of, you know, I don't want to be the person that just has a bunch of books as decoration.
Yeah.
Like they're very, very much like a practical item.
Yeah.
And they have a use, and you know, they have kind of been incorporated into the space, but
yeah. And I've been going through cleaning. I did like a deep clean, especially out in the main part of the studio. You know, I was going through all the books and I felt good that I've read a good majority of them.
Yep.
There's definitely stuff that has been on the back burner, and some of those books are several years old, but I know I'll get to them. And I'm not just like grabbing books to grab them. And especially thinking, not thinking that you thought this way, but like you said, mentioned decor, like, oh, I'm going to externalize to people that I am a smart person by buying this book that will communicate that.
I'm not like against anything, but I very much, for my personal, I don't like the idea of decor for decor's sake.
Yeah.
I think that all of my favorite spaces, the decor is functional. Like I love plants.
Yes.
But even plants have a function.
Right.
Like fake plants never really made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But also, just, you know, some people buy typewriters. It's like, put that on a shelf and you can look at it. And it's like, so what, you have to dust it? Like, cool.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, everything, especially at least in the studio, everything in there is, most of the books have been read, especially the ones in the studio.
Yeah.
And then, you know, everything has a purpose. And I feel like this is, I mean, there's a couple of like decor for decor items, but it is very functional. And I think part of it, though, like you said, you just haven't gone through that editing process yet.
Yeah. There's been some things where the sort of stuff is like in an audition phase too. It's like, it's weird too, because you might think some items are decor for decor's sake. A lot of times what my thing is a piece will speak to me, and it's like it gives off an energy that fuels my
some
vibe
kind of
and creativity. And if I just
like
look at
muse.
it, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That these things act as a muse. Now, there's certainly a lot that's sort of more sentimental or romantic or whatever. But there's some things where I'm like, you know, do I need another sound design clock on the left versus the right? Yeah, it's nice to be able to tell the time twice, but I look at these items. I'd never owned one of these before, but I'm like, this design-wise, vibe-wise speaks to me. And every time I look at it, it fuels something. And I am very much, like, I don't know, like a conjurer, a vibe. Like I want my space.
Oh no, we're the same there.
Inform,
it's got to like, and especially now, I've noticed myself doing this a lot more. But like, I'm not afraid to just walk into a space and just be like, okay, we're going to move this. We're going to put music on. We're going to light a candle. We're going to have some kind of ambience. Like I'll do that. And it's like, it might seem like, okay, why?
Right.
But I think this is something that we have yet to learn as a culture. Parts of our culture have probably learned it. And I'm sure that there's always examples, that speak against this, but for the most part, I don't think our spaces really inform their utility, or they don't. Maybe it's something about like creative spaces.
Yeah.
But I can think about any workplace in America.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are pretty just sterile.
Yeah.
And I think there's room to, and if you're doing anything creative in that space, I think there's a responsibility, and there's actual utility, whether that's financially or just, spiritually or whatever it is, mentally. I think there's a positive incentive behind making that space something that, I don't want to say like carries a vibe, but it has,
absolutely.
It has, you walk into it and you feel inspired. I think there's, I'm a big fan of like high ceilings. I think high ceilings like open up the world. I'm a big fan of natural light. I know we're like low ceilings and no natural light, but like you've counteracted that with like your own counterbalance. But yeah, I mean, like,
but that is definitely something that makes this space during the day a little difficult.
Yeah.
But at night, when the shop lights are off and the lamps are all on, which is why I have so many lamps that are on dimmers with halogen bulbs.
Oh, and I'm a huge believer in like spaces should be able to transition.
Yeah.
Like you should have different. That's why I'm not a fan of the gray room with the, the couple of lights that are the same all the time. And it's the least inspiring.
Yeah.
I mean, you're one step away from a prison cell at that point.
And I think there is that element, like you said, with low ceilings. And while the main part of my studio is a walkout basement, there's a big window and a door where I can get some light in, and the way that I painted the rafters black, like it's a space that hugs you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's fine. And other times it's a little oppressive.
Well, one of my buddies told me this concept and I was like, oh, that's good. And like tried to look it up and see if there was any kind of, writing on it or if the idea had been explored. And I'm sure it maybe has. And if anybody knows of, certain examples, I know there's architectural like writings and stuff, but he basically was talking about our apartment and like the studio.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you guys have mastered your space.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of like, you've mastered, and I think you've like mastered your space. Like you have identified what is possible to get out of it and you squeeze it for everything that it has to give.
Damn drop.
Every last drop. And I think that's an interesting idea of like mastering your space, but is probably a good example of that.
Yeah. And we'll see how it evolves over time. Anything that changes, it's
in a year, you're just like, I'm going back.
Yeah. But, a lot of impulse, a lot of instinct, a lot of making it up as I go. I'm not really good with like, all right, I'm going to clear the room and I'm going to sit here for a week. Not that that's like the proper way to do it, but I'm not the type that's just going to go measurements, block stuff out. Where's this going to go? It's sort of like, I know I want an L-shaped desk made out of the same material. I know I want like this big shelf or whatever. I mean, it took me a while. Like I had this thing shifted down. I'm like, no, it's too close. I had a big shelving unit here. I had to take it out and put it back into the storage area to make room for this. Mostly because I was adapting its surroundings to the size of this because I didn't want to cut the boards too much because like all these boards, these long ones.
Oh, I didn't even see Paul Giamatti over there.
Yeah, from the holdovers. He's watching us. I didn't cut any of these top boards, the length that they come from Home Depot. So just stuff like that. And you know, there's a lot of imperfections. There's stuff that's a little warped. It's not perfectly flat. It's got issues, you know. It's got some stuff that if I had a carpenter that I could contract and make this stuff more custom, it would be closer, you know, it'd be much more of like walnut and perfected and a beautiful finish and all this stuff. But instead it's Home Depot boards and you try to pick the best ones from the stack, you cover them in tung oil and call it good. And it'll get the job done. I do want to say real quick, just had a thought, we should do the next episode of Studio Sessions with because nobody's really seen your space other than the table view.
I feel like photos and stuff though.
Yeah. I would.
There's a lot less going on in my. I mean, but not enough.
I would think it would be interesting if back-to-back episodes we did a little camcorder tour of your studio, so that people watching this could then compare and contrast.
I think so. No. I think that's a good call.
Yeah, I think that could be good.
Just remember to do that because I'll forget. But
yeah, I'll make sure that we've got what we need to do that. But I think that would be fun to see the rest of your space, so that. You know, people have been watching or listening
to this. Turn the camera. It's actually just a set.
Right.
There's just turn the camera.
Studio lights. It's all, wouldn't that be cool? But yeah, let everybody else see your space too. So they can, you know, continue to, I don't know, see what they see the differences.
Yeah.
That'll be good. Although we do have the same typewriter now. So at least there's that.
Yeah, we have the same typewriter. Maybe another one.
We'll see.
TBD. So,
But one thing I wanted to touch on, hold your thought. I just want to touch on this because in one of the episodes, this was something I was a little self-conscious about. You know, I've talked a lot about frustrations with money, right? And I think anybody looking at this space would go, holy shit, dude, you probably spent a shit ton of money on this. Like, oh, you're complaining about money? I'll tell you where it's going. It's going to all this crap. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we talked in pre-show. There was a lot of like trading up going on where I would acquire an item or items and sell it for a profit and put that money towards acquiring this stuff to try to keep the investment of this as revenue neutral.
And if you don't believe
possible.
this, he has a spreadsheet tracking all of this, which is just another point to how his brain works.
Exactly. And I didn't get down to such detail that I could tell you exactly how much out of pocket this cost. But there was that. So a lot of trading up, taking piles of records to the record store and getting some cash for them, taking that profit, putting it into investing in this. There was a point where this was all going to be quite a bit more minimal than what it is. And I don't mean minimal in the sense that there wouldn't have been a lot of stuff, but maybe I wouldn't have had the stereo or this Husky tool chest or some of the other items I bought, some of the frames, etc. I think I talked about this, but my grandma passed away a month or so ago. And my mom's one of 4 kids. She had 5 kids. One passed away a few years ago. And from the sale of my grandma's house and my mom's inheritance, my mom decided to gift each of her kids a little bit of money from my grandma's inheritance. And so when my mom told me that, I doubled down a little bit on what I was going to do because it was very important to me that the money that my mom was going to give us from my grandparents' inheritance was not entirely used for something sort of boring and practical, like paying off a bill or whatever. Some of it will be for that, but I wanted to celebrate their memory and their legacy, especially my grandpa's, because he had a space not just like this, but he actually had 2 spaces. He had a shop in the basement, which he had fully customized with cabinetry and workbenches and his tools and all the stuff he did, because he would fix lawnmowers and other stuff and sell it for a profit, just like I do with typewriters or cameras or whatever. And then in the house, he had a media room with custom cabinetry, and he would digitize 8mm home movies and manipulate photos and whatever cheap photo editing software he had. He had VCRs, tape decks, stereo equipment, all that stuff. So I feel a strong connection to my grandpa because I like that stuff too. And this stuff is a direct connection to what he was into. And so I wanted to use that money to invest in this stuff and just celebrate their memory because they played such a huge role in just going to their house, it was like a magical place. And honestly, it's kind of corny and it gets me a little emotional, but I walk into this place and some of that carries through, just feeling that sense of sort of wonder and magic when you look around and you're like, all these things. And, they just mean a lot to me. I think somebody on the surface could look at this and be like, Jesus, I just like to buy stuff. You're a hoarder, whatever, maybe negative.
Well, I think it's
thought.
interesting. Like each one of these items has kind of been, looks like there's a lot in here, but it's not like you just bought like 500 cameras.
Yeah.
Like every one of these was picked out by you.
Yeah.
Like held by you, purchased by you, cleaned by you. Like every VHS tape was like individually selected. You're pretty, we've been to stores. They've got a lot of VHSs. You're pretty selective about what.
Yeah, we've talked.
It's a very curated experience. Like, you look around and you're like, oh man, there's a lot of shit here. It's like, no. Like all of this is very thoughtful.
Yeah, it's very intentional, and it's certainly connected to what I talked about.
It's like a song or a a great film or a good piece of writing. It's like every word is in there for a reason.
Yeah, and
you've touched every word or every note or every. And you've spent a little time thinking about it.
Yeah,
gone back to
And if you've ever read anything that I've written, I use a lot of words.
Yeah.
I'm a maximalist in communication. I'm a maximalist in all forms of communication, all of that stuff. So, and I kind of don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to that's the other thing too. I didn't want to be like, well, I like all this stuff, but what will people think if I have like all this stuff?
Well, this isn't really for other people either.
No,
like
it is not. And it's a sanctuary for me to, and just to kind of wrap up the whole point of this, we talked about this pre-show, that pendulum swinging from what was expected of me, kind of hustle and entrepreneur, and transitioning from running a production company into full-time content creation. All right, well, what's the full-time content creator playbook? You got to output a video a week. You got to do this. You got to do that. And then, all the financial stuff that you are not only just managing your finances, but figuring out the entrepreneurial things that are going to expand your income. I get to sort of the climax of all of that and feeling very empty, unfulfilled. We've talked about it numerous times in previous episodes. So the pendulum swings into all of this, cameras, street photography, the stuff that you introduced me to, and things get a little crazy and chaotic and all over the place. But it's very focused in my mind, going back to the project management, right? There's a little bit of impulsiveness. There's a little bit of reflex going on, like, oh, I'll try that, or I'll try that, experimentation, but it's deliberate, it's intentional, and there is a knowledge that this is all going to coalesce into something that's going to achieve a sense of balance for me. And then I'm going to emerge and go where this has led me. And to wrap up the point is, this studio and this build out is the climax of all that. So I've other than a couple little loose ends, I've reached a point where I'm like, okay, we talked about in the car. I got to get some of the stuff I backburnered, like my accounting, a couple other things. I got to just like knock that stuff out for a couple of days, and then I'll get back in front of the camera or behind the camera, making things and making work with this as the new foundation. For that. And the last thing I'll say,
you can say as much as you want. We got plenty of time.
Well, I want it to be a little, like I talked about being, a maximalist in communication. I do want this to be more of a conversation than me just, sort of laying it all out there. The space before, and I've said this on my channel, I've probably said this on the podcast, the space before represented an even older version of my life. Aside from the entrepreneur kind of content creator hustle vibe that was going on for a little while, this space was a storage area mostly for film equipment that was ready to be like literally in cases, closed up.
It was like a surgeon's operating room. Like it was very cold.
It was cold in that sense.
Couple of lights. It was black all around.
Yeah, the sound blankets were up. It was very much a storage area it was like a grip truck. It was and I would have to grab all of the equipment, C-stands, lights, film cases, all that stuff, and haul it up to my truck to go to a shoot. And every time I walked in here, it felt like, you know, that version of me was gone. Like I'm not that person anymore, but the space is just a constant like reminder. And not like those were hard times or I'm like, oh, that was such a difficult time in my life. It's just the time that has moved on. The pandemic really kind of helped end that part of what I was doing. And it was a downer to come in here and see a thing of Pelican cases and all my cameras out of Pelicans and everything was just, it just was utilitarian and uninspired. And this transition, you know, helped me realize what this space could be, and a few things unlocked that. And I just went for it. So what I'm excited for is wrapping all of the chaos of achieving this end result, but still having a little bit of chaos in the fact that I'm still doing the street photography. I'm still managing a couple YouTube channels. We're still doing this podcast, obviously. I probably have more going on creatively than someone would recommend.
Yeah.
But I don't give a shit right now because I like doing it all. And if I have to edit that down as I go over the next year or 2 years, so be it. But I feel like I can breathe a little bit freer now. And
he's not talking about editing down the podcast, by the way. We got him on a 4-year contract.
No.
There would be a
that's a
legal action brought.
That's a non-negotiable, especially because when we don't do a stupid thing like move our studio to my studio.
Before I want to go back and dive into like the 2014 like stage a little bit, because I think a lot of people that are watching probably got caught up or had people that got caught up in that energy that was. So I want to go back to that, but like really quickly, it is such a pain in the ass to set everything up from scratch.
Oh, dude.
Like I know we've talked on here about friction, like friction to creative work.
Yeah.
I just want to take a moment to reiterate that it is such a pain in the ass it probably took us an hour.
And we had to compromise a bunch, right? Because it's like, we know these angles are not.
They're
like, not super dialed in.
Can't like, you could play with it for another. It's just, we have it so dialed where it's literally, hey, do you want to do an episode? You know, name the day.
That's right.
Name the time.
Yep.
We'll show up, we'll shoot the shit and write notes for like 30 minutes, an hour, depending on like what the content of that week is. And then we'll just jump in, have a conversation, and then Matt can leave, you know, if he's got to do what he's got to do, or like, you know, we've got something going on, then it's okay, wrap it up, whatever. Yeah. It's so frictionless. And that's the only reason why I think it's been so easy to continue to put out episodes, is because there's just not a lot of friction to it.
Yeah. For both of us, it's almost like, it's like the oasis in the desert. It's like this place that we can go. And obviously the process of setting up doesn't have much friction. I don't love setting up the cameras because I'm like I wish I could make it perfectly the same every episode.
Which I do, like, you know, we've talked about it. Wherever if we end up in a location, I want to take that into account.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, maybe it's swinging down from the ceiling or something, but I want to take that into effect where it's just, or account where it's, a fixed angle.
And you don't have to, you know, obviously micro differences, but it's nothing where it's like, well, that angle's way off, guys.
Yeah.
Or, oh, Matt forgot the tripod again.
Well, again, it would just be another thing that makes this easier.
Yeah.
Because, and it makes the quality better.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we know that there are fuck ups in like every other episode, probably. Yeah. Like, oh, the sound's not exactly right, or the angle's a little weird, or like, you know, one of the cameras cut off early. Like, it happens.
Yeah.
We do want to minimize that. But at the same time, like, our number one thing is just, it's got to be like, if it took as long as it took to set up today on every episode, there's no chance we even get to like 5 episodes.
No. It's just kind of demoralizing to have that. It's that hill to climb for every episode.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the conversations we have. I just kind of I really love what we're making.
Yeah.
And I want to say that that's enough that I would, you know, deal with all that adversity. to make it, but God, is it hard?
I think it's like, because even part of me right now, this feels a little more performative than some of the, and maybe it's just because like, oh, like there's whatever, but there's armrests or there's,
it's all jacked up. And I feel the same way.
It's great. I mean, and I'm glad we're doing it, but it is like, I think part of the appeal, the one comment that was just like, this feels just like two guys having a conversation in a coffee shop. That is the, like, that is the guiding principle of this podcast. Like, we want it to feel like two guys sitting down having it, because that's what it is. That's what birthed it. And Matt and I were having these conversations, on a bi-weekly basis for
a long
5 years before we even started the podcast.
Yeah.
And so that's what we want it to feel like.
Yeah.
And when you start adding in all these production layers, it loses that.
Yep.
I think so. Definitely an important experiment.
And to coincide that too with just your studio space, right? With all the studio sessions, it's obviously not a podcast about studios, but there's something about the comfort of not your studio, but a person's studio that they've built. And obviously I've been at your studio a lot to develop a comfort. It's a third place in a sense for me. It allows for you to get so comfortable that you're open, you're vulnerable, there's no friction. But like you're talking about here like this, right? So the same thing for what this studio was before. Like I said, I walked in this room, it's utilitarian. It's hard to get my gear out to make a YouTube video. And I'm basically taking a version of my life that was over, mobile filmmaking, and I'm trying to be a YouTuber with a mobile filmmaking studio. And it doesn't work. Yeah. And so this is me completely changing this space so that I can access my tools much easier. And this is going to have a lot of editing that's done and fixing and this or that to live stream, which was for the most part dialed in. I can film back here now. Yeah. I really didn't film back here. I was reluctant because the dark and it looked like crap and all this stuff. Now I'm like, hell yeah, I can shoot this direction. I can shoot this direction, all that. So having your studio space dialed in then opens things up.
You've removed the friction in a way.
Right. So it's fun that we took something that we made essentially perfect for us. Yeah. And again, the little things we could adjust still, but it doesn't really cause us any issues. And we transplanted it here and it's fucked up. Like it does not feel right.
No, I think it's such an important lesson to because I think it applies in so many areas of creating something. And I think it is important to have a foundation that is, well designed.
Right.
And that kind of takes that friction into account. Big lesson for me. But I want to spend a little bit of time going back to, I don't know, this is just, I don't necessarily know where we enter on this, but I remember like 2013 maybe to 20.
Go way back.
2013 to 2020. Like what would you say that era is? Like I'm talking about like pure content creator. Everybody was a production company, hustle culture. I think a lot of people watching probably know exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. If they're past a certain age, I mean, there's definitely probably younger viewers that are like, and there's probably older viewers that maybe miss. I don't know. I feel like it got pretty. It infected the culture pretty heavily. But I mean, I'm talking like Casey Neistat, Gary Vaynerchuk, all of the start a company, be an entrepreneur.
That's right. Yeah.
That was like the hot. I mean, it was literally the trendy thing for a good 7-year period there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. 2013.
And I think it ended with COVID. It kind of was the, I'm not going to say the formal end, but it after COVID, things felt a little different after that period of a couple of years. And now we're kind of finding something else.
I wonder too, let's not spend a bunch of time on this, but I wonder too if COVID and the introduction of remote work allowed people to enjoy their jobs a little bit more and maybe say to themselves, well, now I don't feel as motivated to start my own thing or do it my own way because I kind of have the best of both worlds. I have the stability of a full-time job, benefits, salary, etc. But I'm working remotely, even if it's partial remote and partial in the office. And it took the edge off. It made me feel more comfortable doing what I'm doing. So not as many people were seeking those outlets of toxic hustle culture and entrepreneur entrepreneurism and all that kind of stuff because they just kind of chilled out about it.
I think like one of the key, I kind of want to define terms here too, like hustle culture, because it's almost become culturally popular to, push back against hustle culture or whatever that is. I don't think hustle culture was ever the issue. You've always had people that are workaholics or not workaholics or whatever. But I think it was more so you had a lot of people that were essentially sold this idea that they can't be happy unless they do this, this, and this. And a lot of times that meant picking something out of some arbitrary thing that then they were going to be an entrepreneur at.
Right.
And then investing all of this time and resource into making that your thing.
Yeah.
And then you got to grind your face off and do this and do that, and you're going to be successful. And I think you had a lot of people that bought into that. And the secret has always been, the secret, there's no secret.
I know, right.
But the thing has always been you find something you love and then you do that thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that's definitely, it's oversimplifying things, but you find what you really like and then you do that thing. And some people were doing that and starting things. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people that started things, but what do you feel like did you feel like you got caught up in it or?
Definitely. I mean, I was listening to Vaynerchuk. I was listening to, all those podcasts and the content that was coming out around it. And part of why I even started a YouTube channel was it was kind of part of the playbook. I mean, it was something that I was interested in just personally because I've always been messing around with cameras and filming myself or talking or whatever. And so it seemed natural to me, it made sense. Well, if you want to, make yourself known on a larger stage than just in your city or region, make a YouTube channel. It doesn't have to be about what you do. It could be about whatever. And if people like you and discover you, they might go, well, that guy makes videos. Well, I want him to make a video for me. So definitely. I mean, I don't know that I went so hard as to, work 18 hours a day and, all that kind of stuff. But I definitely got into that stuff and I was listening to the gurus and trying to experiment with how to price stuff and, making content around it and what content I was posting and sort of hearing from the experts, And I think, again, this sort of symbolizes too, because that carried through with my YouTube channel to a certain extent, but just kind of got to a point where I'm like, I don't want to follow all these rules. You got to, if you want to make videos like that, you got to start a second channel, or, you can't do that. Or if you're going to work with brands, you got to do it this way or whatever. I'm like, I'm just going to kind of do what feels best to me instead of what
everybody's trying to sell you their recipe.
Like this prescription for success. And I'm like, well, and don't get me wrong, like nothing crazy. And it was during a time where I think sponsorship money was much more abundant for smaller YouTubers and all that stuff. But I had a couple surprisingly good years after I had that initial growth during the pandemic on my channel. And then when I did shift to more doing what I wanted and what I felt, it fell off a little bit. There's other factors at play. It's not just sort of like I blew things up and paid the price financially. But, I go back to, you talked about, find the one thing you love and do it. I brought this up.
Several things you love.
Yeah. Especially in my case. But I brought up a while back on the podcast, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, a series that Bill Moyers did for PBS, where he had these in-depth studio sessions essentially with Joseph Campbell, who's like the leading expert or the most, studied, but dedicated his whole life to understanding how humanity is linked through the stories we tell, whether it's mythology, religious stuff, movies, whatever. And he always came up with this phrase, follow your bliss. And man, did that punched me in the face. We've talked, obviously, in the podcast, things that you hear that just kind of unlock things or whatever. And I have taken that my whole life. and even the entrepreneurial stuff and listening to that, like there was an element of following my bliss to going down those rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But when you do that and you start sort of stacking some negatives, or you're like, that feels a little toxic to me, or I don't really like that. It doesn't work for me, whatever, your bliss evolves.
It was totally like, looking back on it, it totally feels like it was like, I mean, it almost feels a lot more culty now looking back at it. People were completely bought in.
Yeah.
Like, didn't even realize it was a lens that they were putting on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the hustle culture, entrepreneur in your bio nonsense was massive. There's still people that do it. Sure. There's still people that are.
Well, and I think that's part of the democratization of all these tools of communication.
Yeah.
Lends itself toward cult followings because we are, as people, prone to those deep emotional connections to things, and things including people. So you talk about a cult movie, it's got a cult following. Cult of personality is a phrase we use, of course. And obviously, actual religious cults or cults that are, getting people to do things that are, mass suicide, whatever. But so it runs the gamut. Even you could argue that there's, I don't want to like a cult following for Final Cut Pro. Like I'm like super dedicated.
Products.
Apple sweatshirts up here on the wall. Like I develop strong emotional connections to things, and I have to be careful. There's another great quote, Fight Club. The stuff you own ends up owning you.
Yeah.
So we have to watch out for this stuff. The people that you prescribe or that you listen to or look up to, like you got to watch out that what they think or what they teach doesn't end up taking over your life, and it's not really truthful to who you are or what you want to do.
It's so important to, I feel like culturally, part of the reason that we succumbed so much to these things is culture for the last 25. This is a half-assed theory, by the way.
Yeah.
Alex's half-assed theories.
Hot take. Incoming.
Culture for the last 25, 30 years has been the internet.
Yeah.
And so I think that it almost parallels the age. So, in 2014, we're, the, primary internet you could think was like a 14-year-old. It's not a perfect, but people were using the internet in a way that they hadn't quite figured that out yet.
Right.
And so I think, you kind of fall into these things where it's like, oh, I'm all in. And that becomes the only way you see the world.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think, this might just be me, projecting this, but I hope the world as a whole, or at least like the West, the United States, whatever, just a lot of the drivers of culture or internet culture, whatever that is, like, are kind of learning to start to look inward a little bit. I know that sounds really, but I mean that in the sense of having an opinion on something because that's how you feel about it.
Right.
Not because
that's exactly right.
Not because you're trying to be a part of a group or do
you're
something.
Virtue signaling or
100%.
You're fabricating an external representation that's more favorable. It's like sorry for the movies, but the Matrix, they call it like the digital image of your own self.
You're totally trying to just signal to other people and you have no feelings on it one way or another. I feel like we're hopefully reaching a point where there is more of a premium put on having ideas that are your own, and it's still tough because everybody's so plugged in.
Dude, in the process of doing this, there were numerous occasions where I would look at something and I would literally say to myself, do you like this because of what it will communicate to other people?
Yeah.
Or because you actually like it?
Yeah.
And there were several times.
Yeah. Not a fan.
Now you could go through my whole house, my whole digital existence and all that, and I guarantee you we're going to find several things, if not more, that are there to signal something.
Yeah.
Rather than a true
I feel like that's a
connection.
growth you have to go through, though.
Yeah.
Like that's like a spiritual growth in a sense that you have to experience and then recognize that that's
right.
happening and then try to overcome that. And I think that, you know, getting caught up in these things like, oh, going all in on being an entrepreneur or whatever, like we were just so susceptible to that because we're not asking ourselves like, do I like this?
Right.
It works so well with the studio at being the metaphor, because it's like, do I like this?
Yeah. Do I like
or
this?
Is this not for me? And when everybody asks themselves that about everything, which I get it, you know, you don't, everybody's busy. Like you don't really have time to perfectly curate, or you might not be interested in perfectly curating everything. Sometimes it's more useful just to take a crowdsourced opinion and be like, okay, but I do think, taking individual things and being like, how do I feel about this? How do I really feel about this?
Yeah.
It leads to something that's a little more sustainable. It's the conversation we had literally, like, you know, if you would have taken you had to go through and you dove into that like hustle culture. And I mean, I was there too. I'm sure like we have a lot of friends that got completely sucked into it too, but it's like
there was some value, some things I took away from it
100%.
that I still carry in my little basket, you know? So it's, you know,
it wasn't complete. Yeah.
And you know,
I wonder though, like if like it's an interesting and probably useless thought experiment, but you know, if Matt in 2024 encountered that wave, like what is your reaction to it? And I'm sure there's going to be other waves like that culturally that come about that
we could be doing stuff right now.
We probably are.
That's part of something that we're not going to have clarity on rearview mirror and for another 5 years.
I wouldn't even say we could be. I'm probably confident that we are in some way or another. So
and who knows how we'll realize it. For me, obviously it could be the content creation, it could be the street photography stuff. For you, it could be, you know, your interest in AI and how much you're doing with that. You could look back on that and be like, man, what was I thinking? I'm not saying
AI is great.
100%, but you just never know, right?
Yeah.
Back when I was like listening to Gary Vaynerchuk and all that stuff, like, you know, I'm like,
I mean, but
I'm
like
not
even
thinking
even
I'm gonna
I've
listen to this
noticed
stuff the rest of my life, but I'm thinking like, this is good for me.
Yeah. I mean, I've totally noticed though, like I do approach things more with that. Like, how do I feel about this nowadays than I used to?
Yeah.
I think it's a really important question to ask yourself. It's like, how do I feel about this? Do I like this? Do I feel like this is useful? Because even with AI, like I'm fired up on like language models and things like that. But I mean, we've had the discussion several times. Like people, it's going to be GPS for some people and they're going to forget how to, you know, drive anywhere. It's going to be spell check and they're going to forget how to spell anything. Like, so I've made, you know, efforts to go more analog with a lot of stuff in terms of like, okay, you need to preserve. So, you know, you weight down the other end of the scale where you're almost going overboard on like, okay, I need to be writing more. Like I need to be, you know, going to physical books like as much as possible. And I think that stuff's important because that's going to help preserve that. A lot of people are just going to lose the ability to think critically about anything because they're going to let AI do it. I've seen it already happen firsthand with some people where they don't have an ability to approach anything with a critical thought because they're relying on a language model to do it, which is just a predictive model of like characters essentially. So
well, and we talked about this in another episode too. Just something that I've succumbed to is we talked about how at night, like I don't want to work when I watch something. I just want to like put on something mindless, right? So YouTube, some guy flipping through records is this like zombification of me at night. Like, okay, I don't want to have high level thinking, but I also don't want to just like sit there and stare at the wall.
Yeah.
So like, how can I just have some stimuli?
Yeah.
And it's like, isn't that kind of a depressing thing? Like, so with what you're talking about, you have to deploy introspection and self-awareness and go, is this good that this is happening? Because even if it feels good, that doesn't mean that it's good. This goes back to pleasure versus joy, you know, work versus just like stimuli for stimuli sake. the things that you've done to understand yourself as it comes to social media, YouTube analytics, all the things that can trigger a focus or an obsession or whatever. I might be putting words in your mouth, but that kind of stuff where the dopamine that comes is like puts you in a trance, and you can't deploy self-awareness because of what's happening. Same thing with me. I have to sit there, like I just said, when I go out and get stuff. Is this to signal, or is this because I like it?
Yeah.
I have to ask myself, are you buying this because it's going to give you a dopamine hit?
Yeah.
Or are you actually going to use this, get ROI on it? Are you just rationalizing an irrational thought because you want to rush?
I think it's like the signaling thing is huge. Like if you're doing something to signal to anybody else, anything, you're probably going to look back fondly if you just decide not to do that.
Yeah.
Right then. Like just decide, right? Like it's like when you're writing and you're like, oh, what word would fit here? And then if you have to look it up and spend like more than 5 minutes looking up like what expresses whatever you're feeling perfectly, you're either going to edit that out or you're going to put it out there and then feel like a moron when you reread that.
I really want to say it this way, but people aren't going to think I'm a smart intellectual academic writer if I don't use.
And as soon as you've had that thought, you just got to be like, okay, so I'm not going to do that.
You got to smack yourself in the face.
And it goes with life. It goes with life. It's just like, I think that's how people should make more decisions in life, because so many people are so caught up in what other people think that if you've given into that a little bit, you've already just crushed any chance you have at doing anything original or meaningful, especially if you're an artist. Like I think it's almost the responsibility of an artist, quote unquote, whatever the fuck that word means, but especially in 2024, if you are going to create, or if you're an academic, intellectual, artist, whatever, it's almost your job to, yes, be aware of what's going on. Don't just be like in some other world, but you need to insulate yourself so well from influences. Like I had this thought in the men's locker room of the YMCA last night. No, but I had this thought, like paying for a book that somebody wrote, and they wrote that book, but they spend the majority of their time on Twitter. Yeah. So it's like you're paying somebody for what, other people's thoughts? Like shouldn't the kind of differentiator be that they've insulated themselves so much from, I mean, there are some people that can bring together these like tapestries of idea and thought, and that's its own utility.
Right.
But shouldn't the kind of measure be that you've insulated yourself to something, like, and you focus so much on these ideas that you're interested in that you've come up with something, or maybe not come up with something is the wrong, but you've, given yourself the time and the space and the environment to, put together something that's slightly novel or has a chance at being novel, rather than just this tapestry of Twitter that's dressed up a little bit, or this tapestry of, everything that you've seen.
The formula, the playbook, the stuff that we've talked about. And obviously, diary entry analogy is, to me, the purest. Oh,
it's the best. I heard it the other day again, and I was like,
so did I. Yeah. And that's what this is. This room is a diary entry, and the stuff I want to make, I want to stop, because I do succumb to this. I do sit there and go, well, I really want the video to be like this, or I want to make a video about this. Well, if I want people to think this of me, that I'm good for sponsorships, or I'm this or that or whatever, and it's like, oh, you are in a bad place, dude. Yeah. Or even things like again with me, and we talked about this in the podcast as well. When I went to Poland, we talked about popularity, right? Yeah. Like there is a part of me who is the not unpopular but not popular kid in high school that struggled with that.
Yeah.
And not like every day I'm like, oh, I'm not popular, but like it's in your mind, even if it's not at a conscious level. And it still comes up where I'll sit there and think about stupid stuff like, oh, well, what, should I bring my camera into the coffee shop to like show that I am cool? Like, it's so stupid. Or like when I was in Poland, kind of feeling like, well, with all my YouTuber friends, I feel unpopular right now. and again, like, look, we're never going to eradicate these thoughts from our mind. You're
Ever.
never
Yeah.
going to eradicate the part of you that might succumb to social media, or the things that give you dopamine, or the things that you don't think are healthy, right? It's never going to go away.
Right.
You can deploy self-awareness. You can have introspection. You can identify when those behaviors or those choices or those thoughts are coming up, and try to make. Now, sometimes it's going to leak through. You're going to do something impulsive.
100%, yeah.
Whatever. But the creator, the artist, the diary thing, this is it right here.
Yeah.
Like, let's show everybody. I don't care. Don't like it, whatever.
Yeah.
There is not a single thing in here that I can think of that I got because I was hoping Alex would think it was cool, and
Yeah.
it would make Alex think something more of me because he saw
Right.
it.
Well, and you know what the irony of that is like, it's like, I think what I respect so much about it is that is the character. Like you just said, fuck it. This is just what I like. That's what I respect about this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, just stop doing things for other people. Figure out what you want. And that takes time. That might take decades.
Yeah.
And you're probably never going to figure it out. It's in constant flux. And
And you're
know,
going to have step backward.
and I know it sounds like I'm on a soapbox, and
We're
again,
almost-
these are like half thought through ideas. Like I said, I came up with that in the men's locker room last night. I was just like, I was thinking about somebody's book, and I was like, what is the value proposition of that? Just like secondhand thinking.
Yep.
Just squished together and repackaged and sold. Like there's no value proposition there.
Mm-hmm.
At least not any kind of value proposition that holds any kind of weight over a long period of time.
Yep.
But no, I mean, just, yeah.
But we're almost
At the end of the day, like, I don't want to take it too dark, but I don't think of this as a dark thought. I just like, I'm always kind of thinking about the idea that, you know, everybody's going to die. Nobody's going to be, I guess it's kind of like a stoic idea in a way where it's like, you know, you're going to die. Nobody's going to remember you, you know, everything's been done before. You're going to die. Nobody's going to remember you. It's just like, so if you spend all your time, you know, trying to think about your legacy or what you're doing,
we talked about in a
contributes
previous
to somebody else's
Greatness.
vision of you. Yeah. Or great, like
achieving
you're not going
greatness.
to do anything that like start right now spending all of your time and I'm not saying do things that only serve you.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be that cut
It's
and
not that
dry
it serves
selfish.
you.
Yeah.
It's just telling the truth.
Just tell the truth. Yeah. Just
Write-
figure out what
write your
that is
diary.
and yeah, just do it. I can't stress that enough. Like, you know, consider like, it's healthy to think about that you're not going to be here at a certain point.
Yeah.
And that everything that you've done is probably going to go like, and we still do stuff all the time. We buy things and we purchase things with that in mind of like, man, I want something that'll outlive me. We do that. That's why I think that's part of what drives us to create work. It's part of what drives us to take photographs, because you're trying to like grab onto some instance that's passing and that's going to move by. And, but all that stuff is going to, you know, go away eventually. So
Is there something in us? Is it ego? Like this need for almost immortality? Like something? And I don't mean like to physically live forever. I just mean like,
I think so. And it's just,
and is that ego? Like,
there's just no point. Like there is, okay, I totally get why people do that, but if you really spend time thinking about it, I think most people they don't give a shit.
yeah.
Truly. Like they might say like, oh man, I want to leave a legacy, or I want something that matters, or I want so-and-so to be proud of me. It's like, and those are more, those are probably more secondhand thoughts than they are how people truly feel about things.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's just something that just pay attention to yourself and in a way that make your studio, like design your studio. I don't, I feel like I'm just preaching and I'm circling myself, and
Well, I
I'm
think-
not really adding
yeah.
anything useful. But
I think this comes from some of the stuff we've been reading too, right? Like this is going to sound like a left turn here, but bear with me. You know, we've been reading about ontology, and a lot of that focuses around how there's a sense that, especially with music, like nothing really new or interesting has come out since like the early 2000s, even maybe back to the 90s. And I think what you were talking about too, like the playbook and the formula, and I don't know if this is the case, but whether it's technology, the internet, our interconnectedness, the global village, whatever, like we've made enough stuff to be able to analyze it and like break it down to its rudimentary elements, the building blocks, the pillars of that thing.
The atomic structures.
Yeah, it's like okay, now we can synthesize art because we know like biomechanically humans react to these octaves or these notes on a whatever, this melody structure or whatever, and so like we can fabricate.
We did it a little bit today with the image generation. Like, I would hang that on my wall.
I would hang that on my wall, absolutely.
Yeah,
but you fill up people's homes or galleries or whatever with that stuff, and it starts to feel the same, or it's like all the buildings in town, like the sameness of everything. This is something that we've been talking about a lot over this last year, and to me, it just feels like it's I don't want to say it's a lie in the malicious sense, but it's just not people writing diary entries. It's people making something for maybe an ego-based result or a commerce-based result, which is often related to ego, to achieve greatness or immortality or whatever. They're fabricating something, they're synthesizing something instead of transcending or conjuring something from, you know, the muse or the source or whatever you want to call it. And maybe some of the stuff that is truth or diary or whatever it's out there. It's harder to find because there's so much that people are making, including me, just video. That's not, you know, I'm saying this almost to myself. Like, you need to start.
Oh yeah, that's who I'm talking to. I'm talking to myself when I'm,
and that's it. Like, we can.
I think that's why I get frustrated about it, is because I do fall into that sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And then I also get frustrated when I see other people fall into it. It's like, you know, a lot of times when you're angry at something, it's some kind of like, it's some kind of projection of something inside of you.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think that is, you know, you see the same apartment buildings, the same this, the same that. And it's like, you know, you're frustrated by that because, you know, consciously, subconsciously, that you're contributing your thing that you're making.
It's funny too,
is that shitty building that
it cycles back
soulless.
around where it's like, and this is like, you talk about entrepreneurship or what, like that is I think that's the best reason to, you know, go out and do your own thing, is because you see like, man, all of this is just the same.
Yeah.
And why isn't somebody doing it like this? Well, instead of being like, why isn't somebody doing it like this? Go out and try to do it like that. And, you know, I'm talking to myself in a sense here where it's like, you know, put your money where your mouth is, you know, stop putting, you know, why can't this be done this way? Well, nobody's going to do it until somebody shows that it's possible. Yeah. And then as soon as that happens, everybody's going to try to do it. Yep. And a lot of people it's like Roger Bannister breaking 4 minutes in the mile. Right. It was physically impossible. And then he did it. And then like 8 other people did it miraculously in a 60-day period. You know? Yeah. So I feel like I got a little, you know, wound up, but
I like it.
I gotta, that's another thing I want to do is just stop caring so much about, I mean, it's important to care. It's important to be emotional, but I think it's important to not let that lead, in, you know, rhetoric or like in conversation. It's important to kind of.
Yeah. You don't want to get, I don't know if irrational is the right word, or losing control isn't the right word either, but just sort of too far gone.
Yeah.
because it's easy to get fired up about this stuff and worked up about it. And I mean, that's my experience often in my head, you know, trying to figure these things out and going through the process. But one thing that's nice is having studio sessions to work through it with you, buddy. And
what did you call it? What was it? Dump sessions?
Oh yeah, burnout dump.
Burnout dump. Yeah, there you go.
Spit take. Yeah, burnout dump. I'm burned out from my feelings. I'm burned out from my work. I'm burned out from what's expected of me.
Yeah.
And I got to dump it all out there to clear the log jam.
Clear it out. Well,
that's what we do.
Good stuff, buddy.
Thanks
this was a extremely awkward episode.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we did it because it really drove home some points and some lessons.
And, you know,
freaking amazing to see this space too. Like, that's very cool.
It.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.